All right, I think that we'll go ahead and get started as people continue to join. And welcome to the 2020 Tobacco Control Conference webinar series. This series is being put together by the Kentucky Center for Smoke-Free Policy, or KCSP, and the Kentucky Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Program. And my name is Monica Mundy. I'm the Youth Prevention Specialist at the Kentucky Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Program. And welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. I know we are in unique times, so we appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to see this wonderful webinar that we're going to present to you today. We're sorry we can't be there together in person, and it's been quite some time since we haven't been able to do this. But we're very excited to be able to bring you so many speakers and rich tobacco control content. This will not be the only webinar that we will be having. We will be featuring different speakers through the remainder of 2020, one a month, for you guys to bring you that great content that unfortunately we're not able to bring together in person. Today, we have two wonderful speakers. They are our keynotes, and that is Luka Kinard and his mom, Kelly Kinard. But before we get started and I introduce our speakers, we have just a few housekeeping things that I want to share with you today. Let's see here. All right, and thank you to our webinar sponsor, the Kentucky Cancer Consortium. And KCC is a statewide comprehensive cancer control coalition, and it's comprised of over 70 Kentucky members and 450 partnering organizations. And everyone is committed to reducing the cancer burden in Kentucky. So we thank them for their commitment to end tobacco use in our Commonwealth and for sponsoring and making this webinar possible today. And one thing that we will be doing throughout this talk, and that we encourage everyone to do at home, is to use our hashtags #IconInTheTrend and Kentucky Tobacco Free. And be sure to reach out to each of the programs, the Kentucky Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Program at KY Tobacco Free, and the Kentucky Center for Smoke-Free Policy at KY Smoke Free. And before we get started today, just to get an idea of who we have out here in cyberspace joining us, we're going to launch a poll. And this poll is just going to ask everyone, basically, where are you from? Or who are you? So we can have a better idea. So we just ask that everyone take a few minutes to take care of the poll and see what little walk of life that you're from and where you're joining us from. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We have over 120 participants at the moment, which is wonderful. And as everyone completes this poll, I'm just going to give a little bit of information about the evaluation process and some great giveaways that we're going to be having during our talk today. So at the end of this presentation, a link is going to be given in the chat box, and we ask that everyone complete this super short evaluation. If you complete this evaluation, you will be entered to win one of our 10 giveaways that we're going to be giving throughout this year. Today, we are going to announce two winners of this giveaway, and these two winners will receive 7-inch Amazon Fire tablets. And then throughout the rest of the year, we're going to be giving away copies of the Cigarette Political History book. So make sure, I'll make sure everyone knows when that link is going up and that giveaway is started. So make sure that you enter, because before the end of this webinar, we will know who those winners are going to be. So let's get started. First, let me introduce Luka Kinard. He's a teen advocate from High Point, North Carolina. And in 2008, he spent 39 days at an inpatient treatment center for severe vaping addiction. In an effort to prevent other youth from going down the same path, he travels around the country sharing his story at schools, community events, and conferences. And for those of us that attended the National Conference on Tobacco or Health, many of us were moved. Some of us moved to tears with his emotional story, but just not Luka's component. Also, the part of the story that was told regarding his mother, Kelly Kinard. And she spent 15 months desperately searching for treatment options, eventually persuading an adolescent residential program to treat her son. She helps parents who are searching for treatment options for other teens, and supports Parents Against Vaping in their fight to ban all flavors of e-cigarettes. So, from your homes, from your workstations, please help me welcome Luka and Kelly.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
So we'll start with your story.
My name is Luka Kinard. I'm 16, about to be 17. I'm from North Carolina. And I want to share you my story about how I went through my addiction and really where it all started. It first started when I was 14. I was in the 8th grade. I was a Boy Scout. It's out in the woods, and these guys were doing chewing tobacco. And I did it with them, and I only did it really to fit in with them. So I started using chewing tobacco and then cigarettes and cigars and just traditional tobacco throughout the end of my 8th grade. And then I moved on to the summer before my freshman year, and then it was my freshman year. And I was first at my first Friday night football game. I was first introduced to vaping there in the bleachers. The seniors, they had the front row seats, and they told me that all you got to do to get the front row seats was to Juul. They presented it to me as very harmless. They told me there was no nicotine. Told me it was better than smoking. Told me it was cleaner. Told me it was safer. And at the time, I really did believe them. Eventually, for the first month of high school, I was just kind of using it as a social thing. One of the first things I had in high school was a social group, and many of them, if that, many friends, and it felt amazing. But very quickly, I realized it was also an addiction. I started to use it not just around socially. I would do it by myself. Instead of going through about maybe 1 Juul pod every so often, maybe every week or every month, I'd go through 4 Juul pods every single day. And 1 Juul pod is equivalent to 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So if you're going through 4 a day, I can only imagine how much it's going in your body and what it's really doing to you. And honestly, I was out of control, but I didn't see it yet. A lot of good things were also in my life at that time. I used to be a straight A student. I used to play 2 sports, basketball and soccer. I used to be in Boy Scouts. Very quickly, all of that changed. I became a failing student and nearly dropped out of high school. I stopped sports and I stopped Boy Scouts. It wasn't for the fact of I'm not intelligent, because I promise I am. I may not look like it, but I am. And it was just the fact of my focus had completely changed. Instead of school being 7 to 8 hours where I go to learn, school at that point was just a place I had to hide from everybody and the teachers. So it was definitely a very hard reality that I was facing that I didn't even accept. I didn't even know yet. So then anyways, it's my sophomore year of high school. I really burnt a lot of bridges with people I have really no relationship, my friends, my family, my community. And I'm doing the exact same stuff, except a lot worse. I think my highest grade my sophomore year, my first semester, was a 58. My lowest was a 7. So those of you guys that are in school, and to those guys who are not, 7 is pretty bad. It's very much harder to get than an A or a B, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But that was the reality that I was facing. I still didn't think I was out of control. Until September of 2018, my sophomore year of high school, I had a 6-minute grand mal seizure from vaping. I've never had any prior experience to seizures ever, so it was the first one I've ever had. It was also the only one I've ever had. And 6 minutes for a seizure is quite some time to, have that much oxygen come up to your head for that long. It was a pretty scary experience, and it was really life-changing, but I didn't value my life enough to even see that, wow, I have a second chance. Because so many things could have happened. I could have died. I could have had permanent brain damage, permanent nerve damage. But thankfully, I was A-okay. But I still didn't value myself enough to see that. So people would always talk to me and say, how are you feeling? What's going on with your seizure? What can we do? And I would just tell them to shut up and leave me alone. And it wasn't for the fact of I didn't love them or I didn't care. It was for the simple fact of I didn't care about myself and myself. So I really did not want all the attention put on me. So I would just constantly just push it away, whether it was negative or positive. I would just push it away. 2 months later, it's October of 2018. My mom, my dad, they're telling me, Luka, we got to talk. I think we can all agree that if somebody says we got to talk, probably in some trouble. So I got downstairs very slowly. I got to the couch. I sat down and they told me, pack your bags at 3:30 in the morning. You're going to go to rehab. You're going to go to California for 8 days. I said, that's not what we're going to do. It's what I did. It's exactly what I did, actually. I went to rehab the exact next morning. I was so scared and just so destructive as a person in my grades and my relationships. But I was also physically destructive. I would kick down doors, tables, chairs, windows, computers, glasses, dishes, everything and anything in my way that I could find, I was most likely going to break. But also, I was so scared to go to rehab. I'm on this airplane. It's a 7-hour flight to California, and I don't know about you guys or anybody that's been on an airplane in here. Airplanes are not comfortable. If you're 5'2" or above, I'm a big believer you're not supposed to fit on a plane. And I was super cramped. I'm sitting next to my mom, sending me to rehab. There's a very cute little dog sitting in front of me. This dog peed on my foot. It was a cherry on top to my experience, and I remember telling them to get this dog off the plane and all these different things, and we learned that this dog was stuck on the plane, so it peed on my foot, and I was very upset. Anyways, the 7-hour flight is over. I'm in LA. We hit the highway, and then we get straight to rehab, and it is not a warm welcome. It is a strip search, and what a strip search is, for anybody that doesn't know, is they pat you down, make sure you don't have any weapons, maybe phone, or just really anything on your person that's in your pockets, your clothing. And then afterwards, they take off all your clothes, minus your underwear. And if you're a lady, you get to keep your bra and your underwear. And it's very uncomfortable. They tell you to squat, and that's for stuff to fall out of you, not your clothes. It's just so odd for a man to be underwear, fully clothed. It was a very weird experience, and this guy was trying to talk to me and tell me really what the program was about. I really just didn't want to talk to him. I really wanted my pants back in all reality, but the guy told me, all you have to do is be here for around 35 to 45 days, or you can be here for 90. If you don't want to be here for 90, we can send you somewhere else for 6 months to 18 months. My life changed so fast. It flipped a switch and hit a 180, and I was really helpless. I was pretty scared, and I remember going out to that room where my mom was and saying, why did you lie to me? She did. I don't advocate lying, but man, that was a good one. She got me to be in rehab for 39 days. But it was for the better. I would have never gotten on the plane if they had told me how long I was going to be there. But I learned quite a bit while I was in there. There's a lot of stuff that we take for granted. I really learned that, not just your loved ones, but your freedom to use the bathroom or get water, or your freedom to communicate with family members, or really just anybody you have the freedom to communicate with. We really take that stuff for granted, and that was so hard to be in rehab without, that free range of being able to walk around or get water, use the bathroom, make my own decisions, really. But the hardest part was having to sit in my own skin. Because as somebody that really didn't like themselves at the time, having to be by yourself and sit in your insecurities, your fears, your mistakes, it was really uncomfortable. I did it every single day, 24/7 for 39 days. And that was really the hardest part. What I can hope to take away, what everybody takes away from this is that, we look at addiction, and unfortunately we typically think pretty negative about people going through addiction. We think of people who are on harder drugs like coke or maybe methamphetamine or alcoholics, and they're really just down and out bad, and they're on the streets, and they're really disgusting people. Absolutely not. I think a lot of the world is unfortunately going through addiction of some sort. Nicotine is the biggest one, and I think that anybody with a nicotine addiction or vaping addiction is at the most risk because there's not as much support and help and understanding for it. So what I can hope everybody can take away is that nicotine, vaping, cigarettes, whatever it may be, it's an addiction, and it is something that needs to be treated like a substance abuse issue. And that's what I hope everybody can take away from this. All right, pass it to my mom.
Good job.
Thank you.
So, we never saw this coming. Like many other parents, we were blindsided. Everything we knew about nicotine was, from kids smoking cigarettes, and we knew that kids frequently experimented with cigarettes when they were in high school or sometimes younger. And we knew nothing about this. So when Luka came home and said he wanted to try vaping to quit the cigarettes he had started smoking over the summer in Boy Scouts, we thought, okay, well, I looked up vaping, and is it a good way for someone to quit smoking? And at that time, this was 3 years ago, all the information I saw said, yeah, it's a great way to quit smoking, and it's a healthier alternative. So we gave him a week to try it, to try to wean himself off. And it quickly became clear that he wasn't weaning himself off, but because we were finding Juul pods everywhere. So we saw an immediate change in him, but did not immediately associate it with Juuling. He started school new school, new high school. We were excited. He had been a straight A student, Boy Scout, high achiever, had a new group of friends, and we were very excited. Within about a couple of weeks, he started acting very angry. And you know, I'm not talking about just having tantrums. We're talking about kicking in doors, destroying our property. And so I had never associated that with nicotine use before. We thought he had an adolescent onset psychiatric illness. You know, we were blindsided. So we sent him to a therapist to see if we could come to the bottom of why he was so angry and see what we could do to help him. And this went on and on. The therapist told us to have him arrested when he got mad, and you know, what parent wants to do that? And then we tried another therapist. And so by then I was starting to put two and two together and realize this came on when he started juuling. I started doing my research and read, well, nicotine use in teens causes ADHD symptoms, increased impulsivity, you know, all kinds of negative things that we associate with mental illness. But then, you know, what I was seeing was 100 times worse than what cigarette smoking was supposed to cause. So, you know, I started putting two and two together and realized, oh, wait, everything I'm reading about Juul now, these little articles coming out are mentioning how strong it is, how much more nicotine it is, and the nicotine salt, you know, solution, and how much more addictive. So I started putting two and two together, realized that he's probably addicted to juuling more so than he ever was to cigarettes, and it's causing problems that they had never seen before. I don't think they ever tested this amount of nicotine on a teen. You know, 80 cigarettes worth of nicotine in a day. Adults can't even handle that. Adults have never been able to smoke that much that I'm aware of. So he was with a new therapist, and by this time I was trying to get her to help him quit juuling. You know, instead of getting to the bottom of the anger, which we already realized was coming from the juuling, you know, I thought, okay, well, now he needs help with the behavioral, you know, the impulse to smoke. And she needs to help us counsel him on why this needs to stop. But she told me to back off, that he needed his juuling for his anxiety. So we started going round and round. I would argue back with her, but juuling is causing his anxiety. He didn't have anxiety before he started juuling. So, you know, he doesn't need it for his anxiety. He needs to quit. And she'd say, no, I just don't see that. And you need to back off. You know, so he saw no problem with what he was doing. He had no intentions of ever quitting. He was lying to his therapist. He was telling her that we were the source of all of his problems. And, you know, we were getting nowhere, but she recommended we talk to a family therapist. We thought that maybe a family therapist could help us have a conversation with Luka without him, you know, blowing up. Someone who could help us mediate and explain to him, you're addicted, you need to quit. Well, we walked in, and the first thing she asked Luka is, what are you on? She thought he was on something stronger or something like heroin, meth. And she refused to believe that nicotine could cause this. This is still a new issue. We went round and round. They finally recommended we go to a psychiatrist because they decided he had a mood disorder. I did not want to medicate him. I just wanted him to stop juuling so we could see what was left of him. I didn't know if he had permanent damage, if we would ever get our son back. We had no idea, but I certainly didn't want to medicate him with heavy-duty psychiatric drugs, you know, if the source of the problem was juuling. So we, you know, went into the psychiatrist's office thinking he could give us some insight. I don't know if he had a magic solution, but all he said was, well, what do you want me to give him? And basically, well, we thought maybe you could just give us another opinion on what we can do. So he suggested we put him on Wellbutrin to try to curb the impulse. He said adults use it to quit smoking and it might help him. We quickly realized that that was a waste of time, that in order for something like that to work, there has to be a will to quit. Someone has to want to quit. Someone has to be trying to quit. Luka had no intentions of ever quitting. So we kept battling this. He went to Colorado for the summer to visit family. And I thought, okay, this will be a time where he won't have access to it. Will be forced to quit cold turkey. You know, thinking, okay, this will give us a step. Then we can reason with him when we get back. Well, we were gone for more than a month, I believe. We came back home. He got off the plane, a friend picked him up, and he started juuling that same day. So we got nowhere. And then when the seizure hit, of course, it scared us to death. And we were definitely hoping that he would see, this is dangerous. This could kill me, that I need to quit. We thought it would, change some attitude he had towards juuling and help him at least get the will to quit. But he just continued. So I had been searching for months for help, searching the internet, talking to doctors. After his seizure, we saw his pediatrician the next day, and everyone I talked to while I was blue in the face and told them, you got to understand, this is juuling that is causing all this. And everyone's like, no, smoking doesn't do that. Nicotine doesn't do that. Well, they didn't know at that time what it could do in that dose. So the pediatrician asked Luka if he wanted to quit. And Luka said, no, I don't see a problem with it. Well, that was the end of their conversation. Then we saw a neurologist, and, remember I filled him in on the juuling. He's like, I don't know anything about that. I think Luka just needs to get more sleep. And we saw a cardiologist. The cardiologist told Luka that his chest wall inflammation, because he was complaining of chest pains and cold sweats, was probably due to juuling. So he did recommend that Luka quit, but he still didn't know much about vaping juuling, just that it was probably causing chest wall inflammation. And still, I thought someone might get through to Luka, and no one was able to. So, since the doctors weren't behind me, and the family therapist and therapist weren't behind us, and no one wanted to help us get him to quit because they didn't see that much of a problem, I took it into my own hands. I started doing internet research, and I realized that Luka's symptoms, his lowering of grades, his failures, his losing all of his interest in sports, his losing his friends, his losing his interest in Boy Scouts, his anger, it sounded like he had a substance abuse issue. So I started reading up, and I realized that, it needs to be treated like a substance abuse issue, but getting someone to recognize that and agree with me and offer him substance abuse treatment was the next job. So I called the insurance company, and they ended up being my friend in the whole thing. It's a surprise because most people battle their insurance company for coverage. I called our insurance company, told them my son has a substance abuse issue. This is what he's doing. He's had a grand mal seizure. He needs substance abuse treatment, and the substance is Juul. And the person I talked to said, yes, this is a new problem. I think we can do that. So they let me search all across the state for someone who would take him. And the problem we quickly found was that a lot of treatment centers allowed their youth to smoke and vape because that's an alternative addiction that they can use to get them off of their other addiction. And then, or we found people that just laughed at us and like, why don't you just put them on the patch? Or, whatever, try Chantix or whatever that stuff is called. And, like I said, you have to have a will to quit for any of that to work. And Luka needed to be locked up, I realized. At some point my husband and I were so desperate, we were sitting around thinking, how could we get him away from Juul? Even if we put him in an outpatient program, he would still go to school and do it. He'd do it in the classroom. He'd do it in the bathroom. We actually considered moving to Europe and getting him to one of the countries that it was illegal to use. And so, that was pretty desperate and, maybe delusional, but desperate. So doing my research, I just researched what kind of substance abuse treatment is the most effective for teens and found that dual diagnosis treatment is usually more effective. It needs to be non-punitive and adolescent only. And I told the insurance company that this is what we wanted, and they agreed, but everywhere I called wouldn't take someone because it was just nicotine. So they let me search out of state. I searched the surrounding states. I even looked in Colorado where my family lives, thinking I can take him out there. I can live in their barn and stay out there while he gets treatment, but not even Colorado had anything. California was full of adolescent treatment centers, and they were all willing to treat nicotine addiction as substance abuse. And we're not saying that every teen needs inpatient treatment or substance abuse treatment for cessation. It varies, but since that all happened, when Luka got home from treatment and we saw that it worked, in the Wall Street Journal article came out on it. I've heard from parents all over the country. At first we thought maybe Luka was an unusual case, super addicted, but I've heard from parents everywhere, every day, up until the coronavirus shut everything down. I heard from parents every day that their kids were acting the same or worse than Luka. Many kids now have also gone through treatment, some not successfully, some successfully. Every child's different. And we're fortunate to have our child back. I'm very proud of him. And the happiest day of my life was when he thanked me for sending him for treatment, since, when I left him in treatment, he wasn't too happy with me. But
she did also get me food that day. So it was kind of a backhanded thank you, if you will. It was like, thank you for sending me to rehab, but thank you for saving my life.
Well, we have many messages for different groups, whether it's for schools. We can tell teachers and administrators and counselors what they can do to help students. Luka's got advice for teachers.
Absolutely. So
about punishment. And go ahead.
For teachers, or any educator that's in school, I know it is so tedious to have to sit there and almost surveil your students. Like, what are you doing? Like, what's that in your jacket? What's that in your hand, your pocket? And you really shouldn't have to do that. Your job is just to teach the kids and make them safe in a safe environment. And I applaud you guys if you want to take these extra steps. That's so great. But I think that the biggest thing that we need right now is, that vigilance, for sure, is the saying. Like, just small things that we can look out for. If we see a student with their head down, bopping up, back, and down, they're not asleep. Nobody bops up and down if they're asleep. They're probably vaping. I remember a lot of times when I was doing that at school, I would go down like I was asleep, come back up. I remember a lot of my teachers would catch on to it, but they would never talk to me about it. A lot of times, if you see a kid with their hand by their mouth a lot, you can just fit it in your hand. You can put it in your sleeve by your hand. So many different things with that. But in terms of discipline, I know at school, you have to have your authority, and you have to have that consistency. So we can't have the inconsistency of, well, this person got away with it, this person did it, and it has to be a consistent thing, because then everybody else kind of looks at it like, well, what's the point of following it if somebody else kind of got away with it? But we don't want to punish them. That's the last thing we want if they're in an addiction. I think out of school suspension just should not be a thing for this. If you get caught with it, I think if you're distributing it, yes, but if you're just doing it, or if you have it on your person on campus, then keep them in school. The last thing I wanted to do when I was in school was be in school longer. Out of school suspension for me would have been a vacation, more time to use. So if we sit them down, have them in school suspension, don't just have them on their butts doing nothing. We got to teach them something. Or just a small conversation with them is really what they would need. Never let them be complacent. Always educate them, since you guys are also being educated yourselves.
One thing we noticed also from Luka speaking at schools, especially at one school where they had a smaller breakout session after the whole school session, and they had a smaller group of 100 students who signed up for this, and we saw it on the spot. The students formed a support group. And I would recommend that any school possible allow the students to have a support group, provide them the space, the time, non-judgmental, maybe keep the adults out of it, let it be student run. I would highly recommend you give students that opportunity. And the punishment, we tried bribery, we tried punishment, we tried everything. None of it worked. So punishing an addict doesn't do anything but cause shame. We learned that the hard way. But there are several alternative to suspension programs through the American Lung Association and the Stanford Tobacco Prevention Toolkit that I would recommend, and they're all free. And maybe Catch My Breath might have one, I'm not sure. But I would recommend you check into all of them and choose whatever works best for you. What else as far as students and faculty? Is that it for schools?
Yeah.
The ditch Juul cards.
Relationships with students is a big thing. I know for me in high school, I felt a lot of times teachers were just kind of there for a check. I realized it's not true. You guys do not get that great of a check. In terms of what you guys do, you guys deserve a lot more compensation for your work. But those relationships, when I had those very few teachers that were there that would ask me how my day was going or how I'm feeling, just a small thing of just having a human relation was so important. And I know that's an extra step and you guys don't have to do that, but man, it goes so long. It goes a really long way.
So youth advocates, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Youth advocates, if you guys are in here, my biggest advice for you guys is practice what you preach. I think that's the biggest thing is, have your own ideas and share your own beliefs, but also practice what you preach. That's the biggest thing. You know, it's a lot of times people will take you more legitimately and they'll take you more serious if you're doing just as I was saying, you know, if they catch you or if you're caught doing something that's kind of going against what you're saying. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that you say are kind of unvalidated by that. So really practice what you preach, and then also, you know, carry yourself as the way that you would want your own kids to even be carried and carry you. You're representing your families, you're representing yourselves and the school or wherever you may be. You're really representing a community. So, you know, just present yourself as you want other people to look at you and say, man, this is one sharp person. So just present yourself well, and then also really practice what you preach.
So for parents, you know, my message is I actually go for shock value. When we speak at parent nights, when parents are present, it's hard to get parents to come out to those. But when we do speak, I've noticed that their eyes glaze over, just like teenagers when you show slides and give them a lot of numbers. You got to go for shock value. You know, I point out to them that, you know, cigarettes are already, it's a proven fact, are the gateway to other drug use. So I point out to them, well, now that Juul's on the scene, Juul is the expressway. It's creating a higher addiction than was ever seen, and kids are losing their tolerance for it and going on to other things. If a student or a teen doesn't have their Juul and it's been taken away, they're going to go through the medicine cabinet. They're going to go through the liquor cabinet. They're going to look for opioids. They're going to look for whatever they can get their hands on. So I try to make sure parents realize that this is a serious issue. This isn't a simple issue of a kid smoking cigarettes, which is bad enough.
And really, for any youth advocate out there, when you're presenting to somebody, for me, I like humor. That's the biggest thing. You know, humor is such a great thing and a great presenting skill. Because not only does it kind of lighten the mood, whoever's laughing, you can see that they're attentive to you because they're laughing. And then the people in the crowd or the people that you're presenting to, if they weren't listening, they hear people laughing, they're going to chipper up a little bit and really listen to you. So always include humor. It always makes something a lot easier to listen to. It makes it feel more human. And don't be afraid to share your own personal experiences with whatever you're presenting, because I know for me that would make it feel a lot more connected and more willing to listen to you.
Do you have advice for parents of teens who might be addicted?
The parents, to any of the parents with teens who are addicted, I know it's such a hard thing to look at somebody that we love and that we care about go down the wrong road. And I can only imagine what it's like as a parent to have our kids go down that. But my biggest advice for you guys is, you know, that discipline is absolutely a great tool, but just at school we have to realize, you know, this is an addiction. It's something that it's not just a choice. Unfortunately, it's unfortunately a lifestyle, something that really entraps you. It really just takes over your life. So it's one of those things where they need that support too, those relationships. Let them know that, you know, they're making a mistake. They are, but let them know that their mistakes don't make them a mistake and that they can get better, because they absolutely can. It's just, you know, it's something we can all change around. But what they're going through a lot right now is thinking that everything they're doing wrong makes them a mistake and makes them a disappointment, a failure. So just constantly reminding them that their mistakes don't make them a mistake.
Anything else before we open it for questions?
Nothing I can think of.
Okay. Well, at this point, we'd like to open up for questions. That's actually when a lot of the good information comes out, things that we've forgotten that, you know, we get rusty or we get sidetracked. So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to answer anything.
All right, and if anyone has questions, you can put those in the question box that you can see. We've got quite a few that have already came in, so we can go ahead and get started. I will say I've gotten a few comments that some people are having trouble hearing or some people are having trouble logging on, and this session is being recorded, and it will be, a link will go out and will be available for those that couldn't attend with us, so they'll be able to actually get in on the conversation and see what's happening today as well. So let's start with our Q&A. Our first question is for Luka, and we know you experienced side effects of tobacco addiction while traveling, especially on the plane. How did you specifically deal with that?
In terms of health effects, is that?
Well, like when you were traveling to California for 5 hours and you were agitated.
Oh, absolutely. So, it wasn't necessarily anything I had affected with my lungs. Very grateful for that, by the way. But for me, it was mostly like when I didn't have it. Gosh, the withdrawal was, for me, it wasn't necessarily a physical thing always. It was always just irritation. Because, I really became so codependent on whatever it was. So whether it was a Juul or a Soren, whatever vape it may be, it may have been, I was just so dependent on it. So when I didn't have it, I had this constant anxiety. So I was constantly tense, constantly aches and pains from just really just being tensed up, and constant irritation. So that was my biggest thing. Being on an airplane for 5 or 7 hours, really any amount of time while being irritated to the people around is not pleasant. So it started to become something that would be hard to be around people, and people have a hard time to be around me as well.
I had the middle seat next to him. It wasn't.
And that dog had my feet though, so it's okay. No, I had the seat.
Gosh, I completely understand. We have our next question. It's for Kelly. How did you convince the treatment facility to take Luka? That seems to be one of the most difficult hurdles for parents and patients.
It is. And actually, I just had a parent try to get their child into the same place, and they were rejected or declined because their student or their teen was not acting homicidal or suicidal. And I don't really think it was homicidal or suicidal, but I think his extreme anger, I think the grand mal seizure probably helped, but his extreme anger and the property destruction, because it was insanity. I mean, he was literally destroying our home. He dented my car and, kicking in a door because you're told you can't go out because you haven't done your homework is not normal. So I think they were a little hesitant because they still have treatment field has a close relationship with nicotine. They consider nicotine a good coping mechanism, and that needs to stop. And even after Luka went there, they still were kind of on the fence about, well, if you want to start vaping again in a couple months with your parents' permission, we don't see a problem with it. Hopefully they've changed their mind with more information coming out. Because like I said, this was 2 years ago almost, or
2 years ago.
So
I wasn't the one that convinced them to get me to rehab, but I think a lot of it was just actually sharing those actual experiences and pointing out what normal behavior is and what normal behavior isn't. So it was just a lot of really just pointing out the little details. They really matter in this. It's not a big picture. Those little details are the big things that really matter.
So he was treated the same as all the other kids who were he was in it was a house with 5 other boys, a total of 6 boys. They all received the same treatment, and his addiction being Juul, actually, it was effective. So it doesn't matter if it's heroin or nicotine, it's still a substance abuse issue. But I think California is a little ahead of the game in treating adolescents, and so they've realized that whatever an adolescent's addicted to, they need help.
Do you think, I know that you mentioned that you worked with insurance and worked with your insurance very closely. Do you think that kind of opened the doors for some of the facilities to be willing to treat for nicotine?
I think so. I think a big hurdle that parents are having right now, though, is still the treatment field. So here's an example. I know of a parent whose child was in outpatient treatment. The child had been expelled from several schools, and the parents had realized that nothing's going to work, especially outpatient, because she needed to be, I think it was a boy, needed to be locked up and, forced to quit cold turkey. So they contacted the facility, who they were on a waiting list. When their bed came available for their child, the outpatient treatment specialist told the insurance company that they didn't think this child needed inpatient treatment because it was just nicotine. So then insurance declined. So, it's a very complicated issue that goes back to nicotine, and what people in the treatment field think about nicotine.
Okay. I do have another question. Someone was asking if the treatment facility that you attended allowed smoking or vaping.
No, it did not. My treatment facility was very against all tobacco use. No, there was nothing on the campus there that was there.
There was one that I found in North Carolina that was an outpatient that when you look at the website and it's all, Luka had every symptom listed and it was for adolescents only. I tried to get him into that and they told me that they allow their young patients to smoke and vape. So they declined having Luka join them. So, and that I've actually called them recently on behalf of another parent, and they are still continuing to allow their patients to vape and smoke. That needs to stop. Nicotine needs to be removed from treatment. Wipe out addiction instead of trading addictions.
Absolutely. It's one of the most annoying things for me personally, because I'll go to AA meetings, and for those of you guys that don't know, Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's just a big smoking circle. It's so annoying having to go through something. Cigarette smell is unpleasant already, but having to walk through it, and it's just a constant reminder of what I was already going through. So it's unfortunate that all these people that have other addictions like alcohol or narcotics or whatever it may be, they've worked so hard to stop, and now they're just put back into really just dying from illnesses related to smoking, because I know that the majority or a lot of people that have passed away from smoking were also recovering alcoholics and recovering addicts. So it's a sad trade-off, and I definitely think that we need to wipe it out completely.
And we did have a question of someone wondering what was the name of the facility in California that you attended.
I attended Center for Discovery in Long Beach, California.
I think they've since merged with another company and have changed their name to Discovery Mood and Health or something like that. Now, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes has their website has a list of resources and medical resources, and it has other treatment centers that I have spoken to who are willing to take teens. So I'd recommend people check out that medical resources. So far, I've only talked to 3 in the United States who have agreed to treat nicotine addiction as substance abuse.
Right, and Luka, we have a few questions about some of the symptoms you experienced when you were vaping. One person asked, did your heart race all the time, and what was your sleep affected?
Absolutely. So heart, I didn't really think to that. So let me come back to that and think for a second while I share about my sleep schedule. Man, my sleep schedule is so messed up. I think typically on average I get maybe 4 to 6 hours on a good day, and then 3 typically. Every single day I would be up until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 5, or I'd be up for a few days. Gosh, my sleep schedule is constantly messed up, which affects you. That affects your growth. The only time during the day that your growth hormones are released is when you're asleep. So I really wasn't growing any. I was staying the same height, same weight. And also your sleep also affects your mood a lot, and your ability to learn and really be awake. And it affects your appetite also. So it really just affects everything. So definitely sleep schedule was affected. And then I guess heart rate was not always elevated high. I think it was only elevated high when I was actually partaking in vaping. That the buzz, if you will, from the nicotine. That was the only time I had a heart rate increase. On average, I think it was a typical heart rate.
His growth completely plateaued during his Juul use. And when he first forced to quit cold turkey and was then getting sleep eventually, he grew 3 inches in about a month. So we were wondering if he'd grow any more after quitting, and I think he's happy that he did.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get to that 6 foot mark. I'm at that nice 5'10" right now. But...
Right, and we have several questions about what were your withdrawal symptoms that you had going through treatment?
Absolutely. So the withdrawal and rehab was pretty intense. The irritation was there. Also, the consistent aches and pains from just being really so tensed up all the time was very real. I also had nausea, so I didn't really have an appetite, so I couldn't really eat. But then when I did have an appetite and I did want to eat, I was nauseous, so I didn't really have that ability to eat. My sleep schedule was also messed up. So just quite a few things, but I think the steady things that were very consistent, that weren't off and on, was irritation, tenseness and aches and pains, and then headache.
And when you were in rehab, kind of what was the turning point for you in your treatment?
Turning point for me in treatment was 3 weeks in. I was like, well, I'm in California. I'm in rehab. This might be a little bit of an issue. You know, even when I was in rehab and even after, I didn't want to stop vaping. In all honesty, what you do in rehab is you make a parent plan or a home contract, if you will. And I stated and I signed pen and paper I'd be sober from every single substance in the world, including nicotine, for 60 days after I get out of rehab. I was like, okay, I'll do that 2 months, and then after that, I'm back into everything. But really, there really was not the turning point if I want to stop in rehab. It was during those 60 days when I got back home, and I just realized through the ill reactions of my community, because there's so lack of understanding and really just bullying, if you will. I was told to kill myself, sent death threats, just so many ill things that happened. I saw through the ill reactions of my peers of like, well, this is what I'm valued for. I realized I was worth a lot more. That really made me have that turning point of like, I'm done with this for good. So unfortunately in rehab, I guess there really wasn't that true turning point, but there definitely was that peak in rehab where I was thinking, this is not something I need to be doing.
So, and Kelly, when did you see a difference emotionally in Luka during that time?
Exactly 3 weeks. During the first 3 weeks, when we would have our 5-minute phone call, and he would every day. He did not think he needed to be there. He was angry for being there. And, you know, before he went, we argued about everything. We could not, if we told him no, it was an argument. 3 weeks in, he asked a question. I think he asked if we could repair his cell phone screen. And I suggested we hold off, and he asked for a new phone, updated phone for Christmas. Well, I was just shocked that it didn't turn into an argument, something that simple. He actually agreed. You could hear the change in his voice. He could actually understand what we were telling him and process the information. Before, he was completely closed down from any outside information. So he was, at that point, he was able to take a look at himself and realize he was the issue, not the world. And that's when we saw the change. And it was a relief to hear his voice again, because we hadn't heard that voice of our child in about 15 months.
That's great. And we have several questions about what it was like post-rehab. So how long did it take you to adjust mentally, physically, dealing with cravings and things of that nature?
It was definitely a hard thing to do. You know, in rehab especially, you know, you are forced to not be around stuff. Those cravings, I have access to anything, especially where I was. So there, at least, I didn't even have the ability to get anything, so that made it a lot easier, I guess, to deal with the cravings. But afterwards, rehab, you know, cravings is going to be a thing for the rest of my life. You know, I'm an addict, and that doesn't stop whether I'm 10 months sober, a year sober, 6 months, or 4 years, 50 years. It doesn't matter. I'm an addict. So definitely, the more time you have along, the less consistent your cravings are. But for me, what would really kind of deter the idea of cravings or really prevent them from popping up was staying away from complacency, like just always staying busy, whether it was, you know, literally just drawing something on a piece of paper, or whether it was outside skateboarding, or whether it was at my school doing my work or listening to music. I was always just trying to stay busy. And it's kind of a struggle. Definitely in times of COVID-19 right now, we're just kind of stuck at home in torment. I challenge everybody to find something to do at home, because I promise you there's a lot of things you can do. But yeah, that was just kind of something I had to do physically, was just stay busy. And then mentally, when I did have a craving, I had to remind myself, you know, I'm the same person with or without it. I don't have it right now, and I'm stressed, and I was stressed out even when I did have it. So I had to realize, like, it really wasn't doing anything for me.
One thing he points out when he speaks to students at schools, and I think it's really powerful, is he points out that, you know, if you're in the bathroom doing it, you might have someone come in who actually needs to use the restroom, who is battling addiction, and you could be their downfall.
Absolutely. I think that was my most frustrating thing when I went back into high school after rehab, was that for me, I wasn't, I'll be honest, I really wasn't using the bathroom. I was really just trying to get there to escape class because I was just so overwhelmed at that time. So I'd go in there just at least for a minute or two just to breathe. I couldn't do it. I would go in there and everybody's passing something around in the stalls, in the bathrooms, the urinals, or maybe the sink. There's always somebody, a big cluster of people. So that's something I always challenge the students at their schools to say, I can't make you stop, but if anywhere is the place not to do it, it's school.
And we do have several questions about spending time with your peers that still vape. And any advice you may have for teens that quit but are still in some of those social groups and still have their peers that are vaping.
So for me, in all honesty, I still stayed in my same social groups. A lot of my friends definitely, I don't know if necessarily a lot of my friends, I lost friends. I think it was just I realized who my real friends were. But unfortunately, a lot of my friends never stopped to this day even. And some of them have struggled to stop. And guys, I will tell you what, I've always been sober ever since I got out of rehab, but man, it would have been so much easier if I just got away from that crowd. It is such a pain just to separate yourself from people. But really, I would really recommend, just for, if you, not forever, but if that's what you need, just a little bit of time and space, tell them, hey, I just do not have the control to be around this right now. I'm going to take some time away just so I can get this under control for myself. It's such a mature thing to do and such a hard thing to do, honestly. I would really recommend it, guys. It's going to not be the most fun thing and most convenient, but in the long run, gosh, it's going to help you out so much more and help make it easier for you. You don't necessarily have to completely cut off those people for the rest of your life. Maybe they'll come into my life again. Maybe they won't. But what I will say is take care of yourself first. That's the biggest thing.
Right. And we have several questions about the role that flavors played in your addiction. And was there a certain flavor that you craved more than others?
Flavors definitely played a role in my addiction at one point. Definitely in the beginning, it was such a huge thing, but after a while of doing it, I didn't really care what flavor I got. I just kind of wanted something. So I really wasn't craving flavors ever. But in the beginning, it was definitely a big craze. Like I remember juuling, like mango was like the popular thing to do. I personally didn't enjoy mango, but because everybody else was doing it, I was like, all right, I'll do that. Unfortunately, I enjoyed menthol, which was something that isn't considered a flavor right now, unfortunately. I really enjoyed menthol. And then cucumber, as crazy it may sound, that was definitely one of the things I was getting a lot.
Yeah. And how did you fund your habit?
How did I fund my habit? Guys, it was expensive. It was around $150 a week. I had no job. I had no income. I was quite blatantly broke. So the way I would afford it was I'd sell my shoes, my clothes, my personal belongings, my family's jewelry, my family's personal belongings. Really anything I could get my hands on just to make a profit off of it, I would go out and sell.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We do have a few questions regarding schools and resources. Kelly, you had mentioned Catch My Breath and the Stanford Toolkit, but you had mentioned one additional resource. Do you recall which one that was?
There's one through the American Lung Association that I've heard good things about. I've heard good things about all of them.
Yeah, the American Lung Association has several good resources. They have the parent web page, and the name is escaping me at the moment, and I say it all the time, but it is just wonderful, telling parents how to talk to their children about vaping, and they keep it up to date. It's a wonderful resource. And I will
Another resource. Another resource we recommend is the Truth Initiatives. Ditch Juul, those cards, to hand them out to teens is so simple, and they're also parent cards. Yeah. Text Ditch Juul to 88709, and it's all designed for teens in teen language, non-judgmental, free, anonymous. And it's a good resource.
If you didn't get the number just now, I will say that is all over the internet. Just look up Ditch Juul Truth Initiative and go on Google Images or whatever image you can find, and I promise it's going to be there, the number and everything.
Right, and that is the vape talk. So thank you for whoever sent that in. And we also, in Kentucky, we have several different unique programs. We have My Life, My Quit for teens as well. And we do have Ditch Juul through the Truth Initiative, as well as our 1-800-QUIT-NOW, our regular quit line. So great resources here in Kentucky. A question for you, Luka. Who sold you the Juul pods?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, in my area, you could go into majority of the vape shops and gas stations at the time, and you could go there without an ID, and they would definitely give it to you just as you were any other customer. So for me, it was going in and not being ID'd. Also, I would get it through people who were legally able to get it. At the time, it was 18 was the legal age. There's a lot of 18-year-olds that are seniors and juniors in high school. Oh my gosh, there were so many, especially at my high school. So I was just, making those connections with them, paying them a couple extra bucks to go get it, or really just if they were at the time cool enough, if you will, they would just do it for free. So legally getting it from, well, it is illegal to get it from somebody who can legally get it, but then also going in without an ID.
Right. And then we have a few questions asking for a little bit of advice. One comes from a Frisky coordinator here in Kentucky, and that's a youth service center person, a coordinator who works within the schools in Kentucky. And they say, my greatest hurdle is that our parents can't understand the dangers. And they also have little turnout at educational forums. And I know, Kelly, you mentioned that. We've seen that in Kentucky. It's hit or miss. Sometimes you'll have 50 parents there. Sometimes you'll only have a few. So they are asking, are there any suggestions of how to reach parents?
You need to lie to them and tell them that the vaping session is actually an award ceremony.
I think from my standpoint, it is hit or miss.
Yeah, you just never know.
It's one of those things you can include, maybe say, students that come and bring their parents and show proof will get extra credit for a grade or a certain class.
Some kind of incentive.
Some type of incentive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, personally, I would come for the food, but unfortunately, some people always think that food is an incentive. It's a great thing to have. Don't exclude it now that I said that, but let there be another incentive other than just the food. I know it's kind of crazy and absurd to think that there's not enough incentive already in just the fact of this presentation, but unfortunately, as it is, and people don't see it as an incentive.
I think if you have some kind of program and you involve the students and have different things, not just about vaping, but have, a vaping session, but also have tables set up, about different issues that affect teens, and then offer food and, try to keep the program short because it's usually nighttime and parents have worked all day and don't want to come to something long. So
also the way you solicit and advertise it. I know that for us, we've been places where they put it in newspapers, they put it on the radio, they put it on Facebook, on Twitter, online. They sent reminders and emails. 2 people showed up. So it's all about the right time. So you really need to get in those connections of who can really advertise it. Sometimes the students aren't always the best way to advertise it. I even go home and share it with their parents.
you wouldn't have.
No, I wouldn't have. But it's definitely a tricky situation, but it's just definitely the way you go about advertising it.
Correct. And in the handout box, you guys will see a promo for all of our quit lines for Kentucky. So all 3 of them are listed there in case anyone needs those. And I think, Luka, you were right. Really getting it out there and reaching out, making sure everyone knows about it, reaching to the media, inviting them to your event, seeing about getting something in the paper afterwards. Extending the life of that event just a little bit, try to reach some parents that you didn't maybe get to reach before. So
Get the students involved. Students being involved in planning and operations will draw in parents as well.
Awesome. So we have a few questions for you, Luka, about your involvement and advocating with national organizations. Is there any advice for youth that you would like to give to get involved, and or for parents to help engage students in efforts they may be having, especially those who are overcoming nicotine dependence?
Absolutely. So for anybody that's interested with national organizations, for me, I'll share a little bit of my experience. You know, I've done work with the Truth Initiative, campaign for tobacco-free kids. Oh my gosh,
In the state.
The state of North Carolina. There's definitely quite a few things. They're big. You got to remember, there's a lot of money involved for them. You know, it's their jobs. So if you represent them poorly, they don't want to work with you. It makes them look bad. So really, the way you present yourself is also you're representing them too. So back to what I was saying about the practice what you preach. You know, that's a big thing. You'll realize a lot of those national organizations, there's real people behind them all. So, you know, those connections with them too, you know, don't give them the cold shoulders and don't see it just as business. Really try and have a relation, try and be as human as possible with them, but also keep it a little bit professional. And then experience for anybody overcoming addiction, props to you. You know, my biggest thing I can say is it's going to absolutely, and quite frankly, it's going to suck, you know, for quite some time. Definitely in the early stages, and there's going to be ups and downs just like any other part of your life. But don't give up. I know it's a lot easier said than done. But keep your head up. You know, you'll be able to see a lot more things. You'll be able to see a lot more sunshine if you look up. Whereas you're looking at your shoes, you're kind of seeing a shadow. So really just look up, and it's going to give you guys so much more strength.
And Luka, what made you decide that you wanted to kind of speak out and share your story in regarding your Juul use?
Well, I've been sharing my story since the time I got out of rehab, quite literally. I first shared my story in the airport on the way back from rehab. But really what made me want to do it was I was first told my mom got an article at the Wall Street Journal when I was in rehab, and I laughed. I was like, you're not going to share my business with the world. I was really against it, but, you know, a few more weeks came along. Part of it, honestly, at first was just my pride. I was sitting next to her while she was telling them everything about me. I was like, that's not right. Let me mix that up a little bit and really fix that, get the real story.
He was going to be anonymous.
I was. But then I realized, I started talking to the reporter and the journalist, and I started to realize, you know, this feels good to open up. So part of it was honestly just therapeutic for me. If I have a hard time opening up, so as crazy as that may sound, but, you know, being one-on-one with the person is kind of hard for me. So it was like, I could do this through a large amount of people, and that could be my vessel for my therapy. And that could also be a vessel for other people to feel comfortable. I knew it was going to help people. I know that I've been in times and in places where it's just you feel so alone and so just really uncomfortable even to go to somebody, but you still long for somebody to put their hand on their shoulder and say, hey, you got this, you got this. So I wanted to be that person's shoulder.
And do you have any advice or thoughts on how to encourage youth to become advocates like you?
Any advice to become an advocate? I will say that sometimes it may not always just come to you, as my mom had it happen to me. Email people, you know, always reach out, say, hey, you know, go to these organizations, reach out to them, email them, find the people that work for them, email them. It's just constant, you know, it's just the same way we're advertising these parent nights. Advertise yourself, that's the biggest thing. And then anybody that's wanting to do it, I encourage it. It's such a great thing. Advocate whatever you think is going to be a good cause for your community and you and just really anybody. Don't be discouraged to be an advocate. There's unfortunately people that are going to disagree with you. That everybody has the right to their opinion. But don't be discouraged from having your own opinions because somebody else has something different.
Being willing to share one's own story is very powerful and can frequently get through to people. Absolutely. More than, you know, more than slides, a slideshow or numbers. Absolutely. And facts. So a personal story is very powerful.
Right, and along those lines, we have another question for advice. I'm a part of hashtag I Can End the Trend, which is a peer-to-peer e-cigarette prevention program here in the state of Kentucky. I know you mentioned advice for teachers and counselors, but do you have any advice for college students going into the classroom and talking to the next generation of youth?
So for college students, what I would say is, sorry, someone was calling me, I turned it off. Oh gosh, college is such a different environment than high school. It's not your traditional classroom. But what I would really think about if you're going into the college classroom, you're talking. Unfortunately, college kids, they got big egos. They just got set this new freedom of living on their own, being in dorms, and they have this freedom of getting to eat what they want. They have a lot of freedom. And they're gonna kind of look at it like, well, you know what? I can do this now because I'm an adult. They're gonna really have that mindset. You gotta break that barrier and say, yeah, you may be an adult, but you can still have issues as an adult. So really just breaking the barriers down and saying, hey, doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter if it makes it right, if it's illegal or illegal, it's still an issue. So just breaking down those mental barriers is a big thing.
So what about college students going into high schools though?
College students going into high schools. I'll tell you the attitude of high schoolers, they're gonna really appreciate somebody in college. Because you guys are kind of being mentors. I think a lot of kids in high school, they're pushed to go to college. So a lot of kids are striving for that. And then a lot of kids, unfortunately, don't go to college. So if they're one of those kids, they might look at you like, well, I don't really care. I'm not going to college. They're going to almost already have a resentment against you. And go in with the idea and don't prepare and, put that barrier up, but realize that there's going to be difficulties getting through to them. High schoolers they're such a great audience. They really are. I know they're knuckleheads and they're difficult to be around sometimes, but man, if you just talk to them as if they were human and really just get into the nitty gritty stuff of saying like, I know you're struggling and I know it's not the most fun thing, but there's so much to look forward to. I think it's really going to encourage them and give them some hope.
All right, let's take a few more questions and then we'll do some wrap up. We did have a question about the support groups that you guys mentioned in schools, the student-led support groups. Could you give a little details about the support groups you've been involved in? Were they during school or after school? Did they cover additional substances or just vaping?
I think it was just for vaping that there's only been 2 schools that we've heard who are trying it, and we have not heard results. But when we did see the students form on the spot one without even, and they hadn't moved on to the organization, but the principal was with them being very supportive. You could just see that, a teacher or an adult can talk to a student and tell them something and it will mean nothing. But when your peer tells you the exact same thing, well, that matters. That's actually, then it becomes true. So for them to just be able to sit and talk and give each other support, I don't think it matters if it's before or after school. I think you probably would have more attendance during school because, after school, everyone disappears. Just to provide them a space with a non-judgmental, confidential, and a question that we get from a lot of students is how do you quit and keep your friends? And that is a valid concern. So for students to be able to go to this and not have their peers know is important because a lot of them, it's a valid concern for a teen losing their friends.
I think a great way to do it, I've seen, not even just in terms of the support group, I think just an idea I've had personally is, you send out these permission slips to the students, or not even that, you send an email to them, kids can't show each other emails or flyers, but they put a ballot up in class, they say, sign your name in. It's just like if you're signing up to go to a club, and it's just signing up for this, and it's going to give you the specifications. Like if you signed up, they'll give you the information of when to go, and that way you don't really have to talk about it with your peers. It's not something everybody knows about. It's just the people that are included with it.
And I think there was also talk about not making them commit in advance. You can go on the spot.
Yeah.
If you have an impulse to go, you can go, but you don't have to sign up in advance and. Because I think they're afraid of the commitment.
And that also is, attendance is a big thing. Like, attendance should not be mandatory for it, I think, because I think, I'll be honest, we should look at this like an AA meeting for kids going through this type of thing. AA meetings are not you don't need to have perfect attendance for an AA meeting. They're not going to force you to go. It's not something that's going to be a consequence if you don't go. There's going to be natural consequences, but there's not going to be the consequence of, maybe getting kicked out of the club or getting in trouble. Attendance shouldn't matter, but I think that's a big play behind.
And I think it's important for the adults to step back and let the students run it because, first of all, adults don't have any credibility with teens that age because adults don't know anything. And, I think also there's the trust. Students are afraid to open up and get in trouble. I've heard students are afraid to come in and talk to a school counselor because they're afraid they'll get suspended. One student I think had a Juul to turn in, but wanted to take it to the counselor and turn it in, but was afraid that he'd get suspended for having it on campus. So, they're afraid of the judgment and punishment.
Yeah, I understand. And there are also several questions about in-school programs and educational programs. Are there, and I know you've mentioned a few different ones, but from your perspective, Kelly and Luka, are there any programs that you feel would be helpful? Or Luka, is there anything that a program should contain that would reach students?
Sanford.
Luka's actually been on the youth advisory board for the Stanford Prevention Toolkit. And
they're awesome.
So they're giving
so great. We
a lot of youth input.
Yeah, we are working so much, and everybody from the Stanford Reach. Gosh, we are really just, everybody in that is just really coming together and really making it feel like teens. I don't want to give too much. I don't know how much I can give away, but man, it's made by teens. I'll tell you that. So Stanford Toolkit is definitely something I would recommend for being used in school. But what something should contain from a program for teens? It should come from teens. As my mom said, no adult knows what it's like to be a teenager right now. It was like a teenager when you were a teenager, but so much different now. There's so much change. So a lot of input from the youth because they are our biggest influencers as a youth. It's not our adults. It's not our celebrities, our parents. It's each other. So it really should be influenced and really scripted and come from youth a lot, just facilitated by adults.
Wonderful. And as we kind of start to wrap up a bit, just to let everybody know, the evaluation link is in the chat box. So we like to encourage everyone to go to the chat box, fill out that short evaluation, and we're going to be giving away more prizes than I mentioned. We're going to be giving away all 10 here in just a few minutes. But while we're kind of wrapping up, Kelly, Luka, thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to know, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
I think we've said everything, but we appreciate your having us.
Wish we were in person. To everybody at home, stay home. That's the biggest thing I want to say to you. Stay home, man. If we would all stay home, we could be done with this so fast. I want a summer. I really want a summer. So please stay home. Be safe.
Students being out of school, this is a perfect time to make them quit cold turkey. They can't go to the store or get around their friends.
Wear masks and stuff.
Thank you both. I think this has been an invigorating conversation. I think you've shared so much information. I apologize to everyone. We could not get to all of your questions. There were just so many, but we have been responding to some that we can. So take a peek, see if there is a response to your question there. To enter the giveaways that are going to be happening, everyone needs to go and fill out that short evaluation. And that is all you have to do, is go in and complete it. And it's only going to take a minute or two. So I encourage everyone to go ahead and do that. And give me one moment. I'm going to pull up a few more slides here. And while you guys are doing that, and do a bit more wrap up. Just one moment. One second here. All right, here we go. So our next upcoming webinars will be Lindsay Mullis, and she is from the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute in the Health and Wellness program, and she's going to be talking about making sure that tobacco control programs and the things that we're doing are inclusive for everyone, including those with disabilities. And then we will also be having a representative from the Rescue Agency that will be speaking with us as well in June. And she's going to be talking with us about several campaigns you guys may have heard of that are happening at the state level, down and dirty and behind the haze, that are focused specifically on students and tobacco use and vaping. So make sure to mark these on your calendars. They will be coming very soon. And one thing that I also wanted to mention is that one part of the conference that we enjoy every year is the KCSP award ceremony. And while we're not able to be in person and celebrate together now, KCSP will be celebrating all the great work of cities and counties and communities and tobacco control advocates all across Kentucky, right? These tobacco control heroes will be honored during an award ceremony that will be taking place later in the year. So please stay tuned for information about that as well. And I hope everyone is going in and filling out that evaluation. We will be sharing those names in just a little bit. And while we're waiting, let's see here. Luke and Kelly, do you guys want to take another question or two while we get our evaluation together? All right. Luka, we had several questions about do you have any desire to use Juul or vaping even now, years later after your experience?
I wouldn't say desire, but the cravings are there, just as any other, as any other addiction would be. It's something I'm not going to be able to get rid of, unfortunately. But desire, no. Not something I want to get back into. I don't see the need for it. I've been without it for so long. I don't really see what's good about it. Even when I was doing it, I thought it looked silly. I never thought it was something, I guess, cool to do. Physically, it looks kind of silly to me. So really, the look of it, the feel of it, what it does to you, it's just nothing's appealing to me. After, being in tobacco cessation or vaping cessation for so long in the work, for the past year and a half, you hear a lot of negative stuff about it. And it really kind of turns you away. It's just like kind of the same thing as if you're working at Chick-fil-A. You're going to get sick of Chick-fil-A one day. So I'm definitely I really don't see myself having the desire to do it again.
That didn't come about quickly, though. I mean, that's a long process. Recovery is a long road, unfortunately.
Right. Another question that we got several times, kind of the opposite of that, is why did you start vaping?
The reason I wanted to start was I'm an only child, and I was also bullied a lot in middle school and elementary. So for me, the biggest thing I ever wanted was companionship. I was always trying something just to get a friend. I would try and get cool clothes. I would try and get cool toys. I would try and be funny. Like I was always just trying to find a way to get a friend. It wasn't necessarily the fact that I thought vaping was cool. I thought, oh my gosh, this is an easy vessel to have an easy connection with somebody. I see somebody doing it, and boom, we have a similarity already. So for me, it was just such an easy vessel to already have a connection and a similarity with somebody that they would feel accepted with. So just the easy vessel to get friends at the time.
Yeah, and there was also a question about what did the rest of your family think about your vaping addiction?
They were not very big fans of it. I'll tell you that. My family is very straight edge, if you will. Addiction is not in my family. So it was really looked down upon. I remember at the time, the way I was looking at it is just the same as my parents. Like, everybody hates me. Like, nobody really trusted me. I remember those times where I was told I couldn't be by myself in certain areas when I was with family. it would hurt. It really hurt at that time hearing, you know, family members say they can't trust me, or wouldn't leave me alone. It was at the time I thought it was the worst thing ever, and I thought that's kind of like, what type of family is this, you know? So I thought it was crazy. But now I look back on it, and they're definitely very supportive of everything going on.
One thing that experience when they're blindsided by this, no one's prepared for addiction. No one sees it coming, and there is a line, or I guess there is an invisible line that a person crosses when they're using, and all of a sudden they become an addict. So no one sees it coming, and I think parents, they're so confused that frequently keep it secret from family and friends. We had Luka's addiction for months, and finally it came out when we had an incident, and I had to tell my family why he was acting the way he was acting, and I felt they were very supportive. They just wanted the best for Luka. They weren't judging him. I know he felt judged, but they wanted to help. You know, my brother even offered to have Luka move there and stay with them and see if that would help. But unfortunately, they're in Colorado that has a worse problem than North Carolina. So there was no sense in going to another school because vaping is in every school, public and private.
You're right. We definitely see that. Everyone finish up those evaluations in the chat box. I'm going to ask one more question. That evaluation link is in the chat box. It shouldn't take you more than a minute or two. But I've got several questions about advertisements. We have a very popular, that has very popular radio ads called the Magic Vape Shop. And oftentimes there's no proof in the claims that they make. They say that vaping isn't harmful. It's much safer than cigarettes. What are your thoughts on advertisements like this, giving false facts to the public, especially those who are uneducated on the truth?
It's a shame. You hate to hear it for sure, and you hate to see it. Smart business people, I'll say that. You know, they're really getting out what they're trying to sell, but they're not thinking about what they're selling is doing to people. It's just more proof that the companies, not even just the big corporations, the small ones too, they don't care. They don't care about their consumers at all. And that should send a message back to the consumer, the people hearing it. They don't care who they're advertising into. Because I know radio audiences is just such a wide demographic and age range for sure. I hate to see it. It's really a shame. It's a big shame. If there's a way that we could get it to get off, I'd love to find it. That's definitely something I think I'm in support of, is get rid of those false claims without proof, and really just get rid of any solicitation for those products.
All right. Let's see. I told a fib. One more question. All right. Another question that we've gotten from several people are, what are most teens vaping? And we've got some questions about the types of products. Are they vaping products with just nicotine, THC? What are the popular brands? Like, what are you seeing now?
It's definitely a combination of people vaping nicotine and THC and CBD. So I don't do it anymore, but I'm still a teenager. I still got a lot of people on social media. Juul, thankfully, is on the decline. I think a lot. It's still very prominent, but the biggest vape brands for nicotine I've seen lately are Vuse, Hyde, Puff Bars. The reason being is because what happened was they stopped flavors for the pod-based systems. So, for example, Juul, they only produce menthol and tobacco. A lot of their business is gone. But there's a loophole in the flavor ban that is not talking about disposable vapes such as Vuse and Hyde and Stig, which disposable means you hit it once and however long it takes and you throw it away after there's no refill. So those are the big brands right now. I don't know what the brands are for THC. I've never been involved with that, so it's not something I have too much knowledge on in terms of the brands, but I know it's definitely still prominent.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelly and Luka. This has been a great conversation. And I have winners for these prizes. So, the winners of copies of our book will be Elizabeth Westbrook, Brianna Williams, Nancy Daniels, John Broadus, Kelly Leach, Alexa Kelly, Cindy Steele, and Melody Nail. And the winners of the tablets are Debbie Bell and Rita Daniels. And we will be reaching to each of you and getting addresses to be able to send you your items. Again, thank you so much, Luka and Kelly. This has been a wonderful conversation. I wish this could have taken place in person, but I think that, we made the best
Absolutely.
of this situation. All right, and thank you, everyone. We will be sending a follow-up email that will have the link to this webinar. That way you'll be able to share it with anyone who couldn't be with us. We'll also send along a few resources as well that we've talked about today that may be helpful in your tobacco control efforts. And as always, if you have any questions, please let us know at the Kentucky Tobacco and Prevention Cessation Program and also the Kentucky Center for Smoke-Free Policy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.